Alright, we're back with another video. Today's what if video is a requested what if that I forgot to save. I think the person's name was something, I don't remember, but today's what if is what if Makoto died in chapter 1 and Junko took his place as the protagonist. So, yeah, this is the what if video. I hope you enjoy your request and let's do this video. So here's how chapter 1 would go in this timeline. The question is, how would Makoto die and how would Junko be the protagonist? Now, since Makoto's got to be the first victim, I'm just going to assume for the sake of the story that Sayaka just decides to kill Makoto, or the roles get flipped between Leon and Makoto. Sayaka probably uses Leon's room to try to lure Makoto in, but is successful, unlike how she was in the canon with Leon. So in this timeline, Makoto is killed by Sayaka, and the murder is framed on Leon. Junko is the protagonist in this timeline, and as for how I don't know, I don't think it'd be a fake out thing like Kaede and Shuichi, but I think she'd just already be the protagonist from right away. But as for how chapter 1 would go, I do think Sayaka would be caught as the killer, though, so I don't really think too much would change. I still think we get the whole, um, Sayaka killing Makoto some other way. Probably using a kitchen knife or, I don't know, she'd probably use a knife or something. Or might use something from Leon's room to help her out in making sure the murder goes as successful. But Makoto dies in chapter 1, and Sayaka is the killer, and that's basically how the story goes here. Now, regarding the Mukuro stuff, probably doesn't happen. I don't know, the person I was talking to never really went into detail on what happens to Mukuro, so I'll leave it up for interpretation on what she does. I don't think it'll affect the plot in general. But Leon's still alive, so that's a change. Alright, so the next change is chapter 2, and chapter 2 honestly really wouldn't change at all, since Makoto really didn't do much in the story. It's hard to say anything that Leon and Junko would change in this timeline. In general, we would have a completely different cast by this point. I'm assuming by this point Mukuro and Junko are both alive, or just Junko and Mukuro's dead. I don't know. Makoto's gone in the story with Leon still being alive, and Sayaka still dies in chapter 1. That obviously goes the same. Now, when it comes to other stuff in general, I don't think too much would honestly change in chapter 2. I still think Chihiro is gonna die to Mondo. That much I honestly think is not gonna be prevented, since that basically happened in the canon. And I don't think nothing would prevent it from happening in this timeline. So unfortunately, Chihiro is going to die to Mondo. There's nothing that can prevent that, and that just goes the same. But any other chapter 2 changes, I really don't think would actually happen, let alone have much of an effect on the plot. Chapter 3 is basically the same at this point, in that I don't think there's nothing that would really change. I still think Celestia is going to kill Hifumi, and she's going to trick Hifumi into killing Ishimaru beforehand. So all of that prior stuff goes the same. But however, I do think in this timeline, Junko would actually end up being it. But the question now is about the whole masked figure attacking scene. Not only that, but we also got to talk about the Mastermind, which I'm just going to assume is probably Mukuro. That, or it could be someone else. Maybe it's Kyoko who's the Mastermind. I don't know. Someone else can be the Mastermind. I don't really know who would be. Maybe it's Makoto who faked his death. Actually, now I think about it, maybe it's Mukuro, and Makoto could just probably be like a servant role to her or something. I don't really have an idea on the Mastermind of this game, so I'll probably stick to Mukuro, because that makes the most logical sense. And we'll just say she faked her death. Regarding this timeline, I guess Mukuro can attack Junko and play the masked figure role. And that's kind of how I imagine chapter 3 would go, or at least end. And I just think chapter 3 in general would just basically go the same. So, yeah, there's nothing that would honestly change in chapter 3 in this timeline. Regarding chapter 4, in this timeline, we would have Sakura, we would have Byakuya, Toko, Kyoko, Yasuhiro, and Aoi still around, along with Sakura, who's going to still die in this chapter. And we also have the extra addition of Leon and Junko. So in this timeline, we, I think, have more characters. I mean, we already have the 6 characters who would have canonically been around by this point. Okay, we canonically still have Byakuya, Toko, Kyoko, Aoi, Yasuhiro, and Sakura. And the only change is that Makoto's gone. Okay, so we actually have an extra character, since Junko is now a legit participant in this game. I guess with Mukuro as well. But regarding chapter 1, or at least chapter 4, I don't really think there's anything I can change on that one. Yeah, I don't really think there's nothing that would change, except I could probably see Leon being an extra person who could attack Sakura with the bottle. I don't think much would change, honestly, and I don't think Leon's gonna die. I honestly think Leon's gonna probably survive throughout the entire game. That's probably what I think would happen, but yeah, I don't think much would change except Leon's kind of just here for chapter 4. I don't think there would be any real changes here, and I could see Kyoko and Junko maybe forming a friendship. I don't know. It's hard to say. Regarding chapter 5, I honestly don't think there's any other changes I could think of in this timeline. I guess the only change here is that the story would probably have to be Mukuro using another dead corpse. Maybe the corpse of Makoto still. I don't know. I don't think much would change regardless of what happens and regardless of what body Mukuro does use to do her little thing. So she could still try to go after Kyoko, kind of like how Junko did in the canon, or at least Junko in this case, who was originally Makoto. And then this leads to Kyoko saving Junko, maybe, and then everything just going the same there. And I'm just going to assume Leon's going to be chilling with Byakuya, Toko, Aoi, and Yasuhiro. So he's not going to be involved in chapter 5, obviously. That's the only real changes I can think of for chapter 5. I don't think nothing would honestly change in general, and that we would basically just stay the same here with chapter 5. Well, I mean, exception of like Junko, but exception of Junko probably being executed, but then surviving because of AI, or I mean, Chihiro's AI thing. Minus from that, if we're talking about chapter 6, I don't think nothing would change in general. Mukuro would be the mastermind, I assume. Unless you think someone else can be the mastermind in her place, I don't know. Chapter 6 goes the same, I guess. Nothing I can really think of here that would honestly change. Overall, I think that would kind of just be where Trigger Happy Havoc goes in general. Nothing too drastic would change, honestly, since it's not like Makoto really did anything that would affect the moral, or like, at least the motives of the story. I guess Junko would have to be the new ultimate hope in his place, but that's the only change I could see. But yeah, there's really nothing I can think of that would really change in this timeline. The only change is that Makoto is not a survivor, and instead Junko and Leon take his place as survivors, I assume. When it comes to Danganronpa 3, though, or everything else like Ultra Despair Girls and Danganronpa 3, for starters, the Despair arc is not going to change since it's a prequel to Goodbye Despair and Trigger Happy Havoc, so that's obviously out of the story, so everything goes the same there. Well, I would say that, but then again, it'd probably just be Mukuro who's the main villain of Despair arc. And I guess Makoto and maybe Junko are basically her sidekicks there. That's the only change I could see for like Despair arc, but like minus from that, there's really nothing that would change there. Future arc, I mean Despair Girls first, since that came in the main franchise first. I can't think of anything that would change here in particular. I guess for Ultra Despair Girls, well, Komaru is still obviously there in the story, as Makoto's sister, but she would never know about her brother being dead until someone, presumably Toko, I assume, is gonna have to tell her that she might have to tell her about the Trigger Happy Havoc killing game, and then that leads to her discovering that her brother Makoto ended up dying in chapter was actually the very first death in the series, which would probably make Komaru sad, realizing that her brother was killed, and not only killed, but was also the first one killed. So it would make her pretty sad. I don't think much would change in Ultra Despair Girls, since I doubt anyone would have gotten involved. Maybe Junko could have, but I doubt it. I think Junko probably would play a similar role to Makoto in the story, but that's about it. And when it comes to the future arc, I don't really think there's any changes except that Junko would be part of the game, and I could also see Leon probably being part of the game as well. But I don't really think there'd be any real changes coming from their roles in the story. And honestly, the only main changes I can see is that regarding Goodbye Despair and killing Harmony, every Junko being the ultimate mastermind thing is thrown out the window, and instead it's going to be Mukuro. But minus from that, nothing would honestly change. So that would basically be the timeline. Hope everyone enjoyed the video. Uh, that's all I really got to say. Uh, so yeah, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.